Welcome to The Explainer. Let's just dive right in today, because we're going to explore some really fascinating and, frankly, kinda hidden forces that drive our irrational daily decisions. We all love to think of ourselves as these perfectly logical beings, right? Carefully weighing costs and benefits. But the reality? Our brains are completely wired with cognitive biases that systematically distort how we actually see the world. So today, we are unpacking one of the absolute most relatable and powerful of these biases. It's one that influences literally everything, from the furniture in your living room to massive strategic investments made by global corporations. Get ready, because we are about to look under the hood of your own mind.
So why exactly do we love our wobbly, self-built shelves? Okay, picture this scenario. You've just spent 3 grueling hours wrestling with flat-pack furniture instructions. You've been using that tiny little Allen wrench until your fingers are literally aching. You realized halfway through that a crucial wooden dowel was missing, which is just the worst, right? And maybe, just maybe, you even installed a piece backward. When you finally finish the thing, the bookshelf is undeniably wobbly. It leans just a little bit to the left. Now, if you saw this exact shelf in a store, there is no way you'd buy it. But, sitting there in your living room, you actually feel a profound sense of pride. You kind of love that wobbly shelf. So why is that? Why does a flawed product that caused us nothing but frustration suddenly become this prized possession?
Well, the answer lies in a phenomenon appropriately named the IKEA effect. Basically, this is a cognitive bias where people place a disproportionately high value on objects that they partially assembled themselves. And the real kicker here is that last part, regardless of the end product's quality. Our brains just completely bypass the objective structural integrity or even the aesthetic value of the item. Instead, the sheer act of having a hand in its creation artificially inflates its worth in our minds. It's wild, but we essentially fall in love with our own struggle.
Let's get into the flat-pack furniture paradox.
You see, this whole paradox is just a fantastic lens into how our brains actually operate behind the scenes. Traditional economic theory assumes that humans are completely rational actors, so economic rationality dictates that we should value an item based purely on its objective structural quality, its perfection, and its utility. Basically, if it's broken or wobbly, it should be worth less. Makes sense, right? But our psychological reality tells a completely different story. Our brains are actually optimized to value the physical and mental effort we personally invested. We aren't measuring the value of the shelf, we're measuring the value of our own sweat. And this happens because the brain's neural wetware, which evolved for completely different survival tasks, often struggles with abstract logical reasoning and just defaults to these psychological shortcuts instead.
Moving right along to the effort justification bias.
Now, while building Swedish furniture is a super fun example, this cognitive quirk goes way, way deeper than just your living room decor. The IKEA effect is actually just one specific manifestation of a much broader, deeply rooted cognitive bias known as effort justification. This is a psychological principle where we automatically attribute greater value to an outcome simply because we suffered or put intense physical or mental effort into achieving it. Think about it. If something is really easy to get, we tend to just dismiss it. But if we suffered for it, our brains scramble to justify that suffering by convincing us that the reward is incredibly valuable. It's actually a really powerful defense mechanism to protect our own egos.
Next up, let's look at hot biases and cold heuristics.
To really understand why our brains pull these tricks, we need to look at the hard science of behavioral psychology. Researchers divide these mental shortcuts into 2 totally distinct categories. First, you have cold heuristics, and these act basically as information filters. They happen because of noisy data processing or just the strict limits of our cognitive capacity. For example, the availability heuristic is what makes you fear plane travel right after seeing a news story about a crash. It's just because the memory is highly vivid and super easy to recall, even though statistically, we all know driving is far more dangerous. It's a pure calculation error. But then we have hot biases. These are tied directly to our self-perspective. These aren't just simple miscalculations. These occur when our beliefs are actively distorted by our emotional desires, our egos, or even just wishful thinking. Effort justification and the IKEA effect, those are prime examples of a hot bias. Our ego just desperately wants to believe that our hard work wasn't a total waste of time, so it emotionally distorts our perception of the final product to protect our self-esteem.
Which brings us to System 1 versus System 2.
So, you might be wondering, where exactly in the brain do these hot emotional biases originate? To answer that, we turn to Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman and his really famous dual system framework of the human mind. Kahneman proposed that our minds are essentially split. System 1 is our intuitive mind. It is fast, highly instinctive, emotional, and it operates completely automatically with little to absolutely no voluntary control. This is the part of your brain that reflexively jumps to conclusions. On the other hand, we have System 2. This is the deliberate mind. It's slow, it's effortful, and it is highly logical. System 2 handles all the complex computations and is supposed to provide the necessary oversight to catch and correct the emotional errors made by System 1. In a perfectly rational world, System 2 would look at that wobbly flat-pack bookshelf and immediately override System 1's emotional pride with cold, hard logic.
But, and this is a massive but, Kahneman put it perfectly, System 2 is inherently lazy. It requires significant metabolic energy to function. So, the absolutely crucial point here is this. Because System 2 demands so much active mental engagement, focused attention, and raw physical energy, it often just decides to take a break. It literally defers to the fast, automatic responses of System 1. When it comes to effort justification, our logical System 2 is simply too lazy to step in and correct the emotional illusions generated by System 1. Frankly, it just takes way less energy to believe the wobbly shelf is a total masterpiece.
Okay, so let's talk about outsmarting your own brain.
Now that we understand the actual mechanics, how our lazy System 2 just lets our emotional System 1 run wild with these hot biases, let's look at the practical application. Because the IKEA effect is cute when we're talking about furniture, sure, but the underlying effort justification bias can be incredibly destructive in our professional and personal lives. Just think about the sunk cost fallacy. That tricks us into continuing to pour money into a failing business or a bad investment simply because we've already paid for it. We're literally just justifying our past effort. Or how about irrational escalation? That makes us double down on a bad strategy despite obvious, glaring negative outcomes. We also see this in the generation effect, where a manager might favor a frankly terrible business idea solely because they were the one who generated it. They helped build the idea, so they wildly overvalue it. We even fall prey to the processing difficulty effect. This is where we actually believe a piece of information or a research paper is more profound and valuable just because the language was dense and difficult to read. In all of these cases, we are essentially confusing the difficulty of the journey with the true value of the destination.
So, I want to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on. Where in your own life are you overvaluing a wobbly outcome simply because it was difficult to achieve? Are you holding on to a flawed business project, a toxic relationship, or maybe just an inefficient workflow, all because of the blood, sweat, and tears you've already poured into it? Our brains are completely wired to find meaning in our struggles, but sometimes a wobbly shelf is just a wobbly shelf. By recognizing the IKEA effect and the lazy nature of our logical minds, we can actually start to outsmart our own brains and make clearer, much better decisions. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning how you think.